Microsoft's Windows 11 event this week was filled with promises about the future, but very little on the when and how the new features would work. But there is lots more you could use to become more productive and secure. So I'll be looking at all of the new features Microsoft announced at the event, so you can understand which are going to be available to you and how you might use them in practice. Plus, there's preview support for ARM Ampere CPUs in Azure virtual machines. So let's start off by talking about some of the integration features that Microsoft announced this week for Windows 11 and Windows 365. Now, if you're not aware, Windows 365 is Microsoft's cloud PC solution. So essentially, this is a Windows 10 or Windows 11 desktop in the cloud. And there are 4 key new features that Microsoft announced. The first is Windows 365 Boot. Now, this will allow users to boot straight into their cloud PC without first having to log into their Windows 11 local desktop first. Windows 365 Switch will allow users to seamlessly switch between their local Windows 11 desktop and Windows 365 using the mouse, keyboard, or swipe gestures. Windows 365 Offline will allow users to continue working with their cloud PC even if they lose their internet connection, and then seamlessly reconnect when they get their internet back. And there's going to be a new Windows 365 app that will allow users to connect to their cloud PC without first having to open a web browser. So out of all these features, for me, the most exciting is the Windows 365 Offline feature. Now, I have no idea actually how this is going to work, and I would imagine that it's going to be quite a technical challenge for Microsoft to pull this off, unless there's something about it that I don't understand. Of course, maybe there are some caveats that we don't know about, and Microsoft isn't saying very much about this feature at the moment. But of course, the biggest disadvantage of using a cloud PC is that it requires you to have a continuous internet connection to use it. So if Microsoft can pull this off to enable cloud PCs to be used when you lose your internet connection and then just to pick up that use when you come back online, that's going to be an amazing bonus for users of Windows 11. Now, of course, all of these features are exclusive to Windows 365 and Windows 11. So if you're using some other solution provided by another cloud provider or another operating system, none of these features that were announced by Microsoft this week are going to work for you. And of course, the ability to boot straight into your cloud PC and all this switching ability between them, Microsoft is going to make it easier basically for users to get access to their cloud PC. I think all of these things are great. So apart from the potential technical challenges of how the offline mode is going to work, the one other thing that we don't really know about all of this is the when all of this is going to come. Now, Microsoft has another feature released for Windows 11, of course, this year, expected to drop sometime in fall. I doubt that any of these things will arrive in that release because we haven't seen any of these things in testing yet, although I could, of course, be wrong about that. So what does that mean? Does it mean that we won't see these things come until the feature release that's planned for 2023? Well, that's a long time to wait. Could these features be delivered to Windows 11 as some kind of other update that doesn't necessarily require users to wait a whole year for a feature update? That's also possible. But while I think, these features are going to be really useful, and as I understand, Windows 365 has been quite popular since it was released, I think these integration features really, add something to this whole offer that Microsoft has for cloud PCs that really makes it much more attractive from a usability point of view and an easier sell for users. Because let's face it, people don't really like remote desktops that much. And that's partly because they're quite often poorly implemented. The organizations that implement them in their own data centers often just don't assign the right amount of power and bandwidth to these desktops, so they perform poorly. But if Microsoft can get the performance right, the pricing right, and the integration with Windows 11 right, so that either you can maybe use this on a bring your own device, or maybe you can use it on a thin client, but the whole integration with, especially bring your own devices in Windows 11, I don't know, for me feels maybe this is a potential game changer for this service. If, all the other pieces, of course, fall into place in terms of pricing and performance. So a management feature that Microsoft announced this week was organizational messages. Now what this will allow IT departments to do is to push out a pop-up message, so either it'll appear, I think, above the taskbar or in the action center, to users en masse. Now, I assume that this will work regardless, of course, of whether a device is connected to the corporate network or not, so it should work for all of your remote users. But I think this is something, that's been missing from Windows, or maybe that's not been missing. There are ways to do it if you're all connected, of course, to a corporate intranet. But now in today's, hybrid work scenario where we have people distributed, in the office, working remotely, we need a solution that works for everybody. And, I think, while this is not a groundbreaking feature, I think it's a useful addition to the operating system. Something else that Microsoft announced as part of the event is a new feature called Remote Help. Now, this one just really infuriates me, to be honest, because I don't know, really this is just a slightly beefed up version of Quick Assist, which is something that's been part of Windows 10 for ages and now Windows 11. And it's, designed to be an easy way to give remote users secure support. Now, many organizations, of course, use things like TeamViewer for the extra features it provides. And Remote Help is, as I said, just basically Quick Assist with a few extra features to make it a little bit more palatable for the enterprise. But get this, Microsoft is planning to charge $3.50 per user per month. Now, depending on your organization, the size of it, of course, and how often users need support, I don't really like the idea of having to potentially pay per user when, many of my users may very rarely require support. So how this is going to add up in terms of a return on investment isn't always clear to me. And I just feel that this feature is such a basic, fundamental thing that organizations require that it should just be a free part of the operating system. And if Microsoft can't make it a free part of the operating system, then at least they could give it away for free for, people who have those E3, E5, Microsoft 365 enterprise subscriptions. But no, this is going to be an add-on. It's not part, it's not coming as part of any of those subscriptions. And I just, Microsoft, what are you doing with this? It's just a little bit crazy. So I think this is something, you can probably, for most organizations, just, pass on basically. Now, AutoPatch is a new feature that Microsoft has announced, and this is going to help organizations automatically patch things like Microsoft Edge, the Microsoft 365, apps for enterprise, drivers, firmware updates, help to keep all of those things up to date. Now, this is something that is separate from Windows Update for Business. It's a complementary feature. It requires a Windows 10 or 11 Enterprise E3 license. Then you get this AutoPatch feature at no additional cost, and it's actually going to be released in July this year, so we do have an actual date for this, so that's important, unlike most of the features that Microsoft announced this week. So basically it's to help IT professionals keep Windows software up to date, all the extra stuff that goes on top of Windows itself. And again, it's going to require MDM, so assumably Intune. Maybe you can make it work with other MDM providers. I don't know at this stage. I guess yes. But, essentially, you need to be using Intune to make this work. So again, it's going to be available to a limited set of users. But anything that helps us to keep, software up to date and secure has got to be a good thing. Now, there are a couple of extra security features coming to Windows 11. Now, Smart App Control is kind of, how to describe it, kind of a gatekeeper for your applications that will work, continuously to ensure that the applications you're running are not potentially dangerous. So as far as I understand, this is going to work by, checking certificates, of the application signed, checking that against a database that Microsoft is basically hosting in the cloud. Now, I think that Apple has a similar system to this, and of course famously, I don't know whether it was earlier this year or last year, that system went down, so the connection to the cloud kind of stopped working and users were essentially not able to launch applications. So I hope that as Microsoft implements this feature, that there is some kind of, fallback mechanism for if that mechanism to communicate with the cloud service stops working, that it isn't going to mean that we're not going to be able to launch the applications on our device. But I'm very intrigued to see how all of this works, to understand again when it will be available, who it's going to be available for, and I think, again, anything that helps us to improve security is a great thing. There's also going to be enhanced phishing detection and protection as part of Windows 11 built into Microsoft Defender Smart Screen, and it's a new capability that should make it harder for hackers to phish credentials and personal information from applications and websites. Also, Credential Guard, it's a feature that's been in Windows for quite a long time now. It's going to be switched on by default for enterprise editions of Windows 11. So this basically is a feature that helps to protect credentials in memory from hackers and give them an extra set of protections using virtualization-based security. There's a new feature called personal data encryption coming. Now, to be honest, Microsoft says, well, this is to help protect user files and data when a user is not signed into a device. Now, what I don't really understand about this is how it differs from the protections that we already have in Windows, things like BitLocker and encrypted file system, all this kind of stuff. Microsoft didn't really say it as part of this announcement, but just the IT admins can use it in case a user device is stolen. So, assumably this uses some of those technologies that already exist and just make it easier in some way to make sure user data is protected. But a bit thin on details at the moment. There's also a new feature coming called config log. Now, basically, this uses an MDM policy. So again, it's for people who have Intune to monitor registry keys on each device to see if any changes were made. And if a change was made, then config log will basically revert those changes immediately to whatever IT have configured, assumably also in their MDM policies. So again, a great thing, maybe a little bit limited again in how it can be used and who is going to be able to use it. But again, everything is being pushed towards the cloud configuration. So, this is another thing that can help protect those configurations. So those are the major announcements that were made at the event. There was lots of kind of marketing fluff as usual. You got Panos Panay kind of walking around, pacing up and down with what seemed to be like a virtual background behind him. Then Satya came on at the end and said some other stuff. To be honest, I just switched off at that point because, what you got in the middle of that presentation, if you want to go and look at it, is, the really interesting stuff, the stuff that I've described as part of this video. And of course, I've included some of that here. And, I think it's exciting in many ways, but, there are lots of caveats. A lot of it only applies to people using cloud services, people that have particular subscriptions to particular services. And, a lot of it, we don't know when it's coming. So, is it going to be the next version of Windows 11? We don't know very much about all of that stuff yet. So it was all a bit wishy-washy, not a complete disaster, of course, because the features themselves, are useful. But we'll see if and when Microsoft will actually deliver on those promises. Microsoft also announced this week preview support for Azure VMs running on ARM Ampere CPUs. Now, Microsoft says that this can lead to up to 50% better price performance compared to, of course, a similar Intel chip running on the x86 architecture. So it looks like Microsoft will be able to pass on these savings to its customers. Now, it's quite interesting that the VM guests supported with this, at least in preview phase, are various Linux distributions like Ubuntu and CentOS, and it also supports Windows 11 Professional and Enterprise Edition. Now, what's missing here, of course, is Windows Server support. Now, as far as I understand, Microsoft does have a version of Windows Server that runs on ARM, Whether it uses this in its own Azure data centers to support the entire infrastructure or not, I don't know, but I don't think there's a commercially available version of Windows Server at the moment that runs on ARM. So it'll be interesting to see as Microsoft begins to bring this support for the ARM architecture into Azure, whether we'll actually be able to get a version of Windows Server that also runs on the ARM architecture that we can at least store within a virtual machine. So if you found this video useful, then please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see this kind of news update every week. And I'll see you next time.